Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir Podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson. Let's jump into the news. First up, there's a new Tidewave Web service. Now, we're going to talk about it very briefly here, but stay tuned for our interview with José Valim, where we're going to go much deeper on this very exciting new project, because it's not just for Elixir. It's actually coming to Rails as well. But we do have some links where you can go check it out. José shared a short video on X where he posted and shows this demonstrated in real time. And then also there's a blog post that we're linking to on the tidewave.ai blog that introduces how it's working with Phoenix and with Rails.
And just to whet the appetite, what is Tidewave? If you don't remember, Tidewave is an MCP server for Phoenix and Rails. It started off as completely headless, right? You just configure your client of choice to point to this MCP server, and it gives it runtime intelligence, as it says, right? Tidewave Web is a new enhancement on top of that provides a UI and more tooling for the LLM to actually see your site, your web app that you're trying to develop. And that's as far as we'll go. You have to stay tuned for José's more detailed descriptions of everything that I can do. All right, next up. I'll go ahead and say it, right? Today's news is basically Dashbit Day. So they're talking a lot about Tidewave, and we'll hear more about that. But also, they have a new blog post on the ElixirLang blog, and it is titled "Interoperability in 2025 Beyond the ElixirLang VM." And a lot of this work is done by the community and Dashbit as well. And you know, over the course of all these things releasing, we've covered it. So not a lot of it's new, but it is easy to forget just how much there is out there, how much interoperability there is. And so this article is wrapping that all up in a nice package to just remind you of how flexible things can be. So here's what it talks about. It's all the different ways that Elixir and the BEAM has interop with other languages and runtimes. You've got historical options, right? The things that are just built into OTP for a long time. That's things like NIFs, natively implemented functions, ports, and of course the ElixirLang distribution, protocol, so it can interop with itself, right? in other places. But it's also covering a lot of the newer things. So we'll start off with AtomVM. It's a lightweight implementation of the ElixirLang VM that can run on constrained environments, things like ESP32, Pico, STM32, these little tiny little chips, right? Not a lot of space. Think of Aladdin's genie, big extraordinary power, itty bitty little living space, right?
That goes so well. It's like that's got to be like maybe the new tagline for the BEAM, right?
And with AtomVM, that's not all there is to it. It's not just itty bitty tiny space. It's also targeting WASM, so WebAssembly, which is just a whole different kind of playing field, right? The browser, for example. And speaking of, that's where Popcorn kind of comes in. So Popcorn is building upon AtomVM, bringing the runtime to the browser. Another one is Hologram. We've talked about this a little bit. It's up and coming. It's a new full stack isometric Elixir web framework that runs on top of Phoenix, and it creates the interactive web applications entirely in Elixir. So that's front end included, right? So you write Elixir, some of it runs in the browser. Crazy. All right. And then we've got more of the systems level things. We've got NIFs in C. We've got the library called Fine, which is a library for working with C++ NIFs. We've got Rustler, which is about Rust. Ziggler, which is about Zig. And then Python X, which runs the Python interpreter in the same OS process as your Elixir application and can transport terms back and forth. Also managed by UV, the Python package manager. And all. I don't know if it's more than a package manager, but the thing that makes Python easier to work with. So anyway, the post goes into much greater detail on each of those things. So if you're looking to integrate with another language or runtime, definitely check that out. Pretty interesting. I wonder, thought just occurred to me, take that blog post and set it as like a Claude memory. Right?
Yeah,
and so so don't have it like stuffed into your context window the entire time, but like say if there is something I need to do at a systems level, look at this blog post to see if there is a way that I can accomplish that through some other ecosystem that I can tie in to the Beam with one of these libraries, Rust or Ziggler, Python X, all that kind of stuff. That way it doesn't try to rewrite the world, when something doesn't quite exist. I don't know, just a thought. Be interesting.
That's fun. And next up, another Dashbit announcement is Livebook Teams is out of beta. So with this, you're able to deploy Elixir notebooks as internal apps or turn Livebook into a controlled environment for running runbooks, is what they're called, for performing production operations. If you have those common administrative scripts, they're really generally one-offs. That's why you don't build it into your app, but occasionally you need it, and maybe you need to tweak it every time you do it. So something like that can be an excellent option for Livebooks. And so over the last month with Livebook, they've added SSO, Google Workspace support, plus a few auth-N and auth-Z options and knobs. So you can check it out at livebook.dev/teams. And what they've shared is that you can actually try out the Livebook Teams with your team for free for 30 days. That's pretty cool if you're wanting to see just really what can this do for us. So that's exciting. But as part of this work, they even open sourced, and we've got a link to it. It's under the ErlF GitHub organization. It's an OpenID Connect client library in ErLang and Elixir. So if you're needing to do OpenID, that SSO kind of thing with other services, the work that they put into Livebook Teams has been extracted into a community project. So very much appreciate that contribution as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their marketing page for Livebook Teams is also very convincing. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Of course, Livebook has a bunch of UI building blocks, right? So you can put in data tables in there, data tables that are lazy loaded, right? Streamable. You can put in forms. So you program a form and then somebody can have view only access, but they can, you can give them these forms instead. So it's a very controlled environment. You don't give them carte blanche on just executing any code on your nodes. There's a lot in here. It is worthwhile, I think. All right, next up, Open version 2.20 was released with some good improvements. So we'll give you an overview. It includes a new function called Update Job. There's another one where you can now query by unique state groups. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, a good improvement to the stability of plugins. All right, so let's dive into a couple of them. So some of these are quotes from their update. So this introduces Oban.UpdateJob. It's a helper function to simplify updating existing jobs while ensuring data consistency and safety. I don't have to do this too often, but when I do have to update a job, you kind of have to reconstruct what the data structure is in the job, which you typically don't have to worry about, right? You set these things with the use macro, somewhere, and they just get populated into the job, automatically. And so when you have to update it, you kind of have to figure out, where did this stuff go, and then make sure that it doesn't change or set it in the right place. And so this update job helper function kind of simplifies that. Another one is it adds a compound index for canceled at and discarded at columns. So this is done so that the Oban plugin pruner performance, is improved for canceled and discarded jobs, which is nice. Let's see, the stability one. Plugins and the internal stager are now nested within a secondary supervision tree to improve the system resilience and stability. So, for example, if a plugin crashed, Oban crashed. So, not a great time, I'm sure. So, the idea is that these plugin failures can now, be isolated from Oban in general. That's nice. For example, if the pruner crashes, I don't need all of my jobs to come to a grinding halt, right? And then the last little bit there is unique state groups. And so what this is about is if you're looking for basically the way to retry a job or to see if a job is still out there in an incomplete state, you have to know all the states that means. In the Oban job. So it could mean retryable or scheduled or something like that, right? There's a list of 4 of them, I think. You have to know that. And it's easy to forget. So it's subtle little bugs. And so now they give you little helpers there about unique state groups, which is nice. All right. Well, that's it about Oban 2.20. So we got some links to their changelog and to the release notes. Go check it out.
And next up, there's a project we haven't talked about for a while, actually. I think we did talk about it some time ago, but it's called PhoenixAnalytics, and version 0.4.0 was released. This adds some fun, nice things like 12 themes, but it's also a whole lot easier to use. It's more plug and play, and it supports Postgres, MySQL, SQLite for your repo. So you may be asking, okay, exactly what is PhoenixAnalytics again? So it is analytics for Phoenix applications, but it's something that you run inside your application, inside your Phoenix app, and it gives you, it's like a own little dashboard. And what it's doing is giving you it's pretty, it's nice and looks great. It's just like how many unique visitors, total page views, total requests, views per visit, total visits over time, top pages, top referred, device usage, all that kind of great stuff that it's collecting and making available, and then just giving you an endpoint to your own app where you can see it. I just think that's neat when you can say, my app can do all of this, and maybe as I grow, I'll want to do something different and go into a different service or something like that. But, I can get a lot for free built into what's in the BEAM and what's in community packages like this one. So what is interesting about this release? The big change is that previously it was requiring the use of DuckDB, which is a specialized database to help aggregate and analyze all this data. But the problem was many developers were having a really hard time getting DuckDB set up because it's not in most people's wheelhouse, might have a little special behaviors, knobs, something like that. So what they did is they split it out to say, you don't have to do it with DuckDB now. It still is supported. So if you already have it, you're already using it, great, keep going. But if you're wanting to say, I want to try this out, and I don't really want to launch a whole new database type, I have already got Postgres or MySQL or SQLite, well, it can now work with those. It makes it a whole lot more approachable. If you haven't given it a try before, now may be a good time.
That's pretty cool. I had to look up what makes DuckDB different. We'll leave some links in the show notes. It's mostly Postgres compatible, though. There's the TLDR, but mostly is the key word there. Also, this is dumb of me, but 12 themes added. Good Lord, 12 to just a UI. I had to look at what they were. And obviously they use Tailwind because all these colors are basically Tailwind colors. So it's just like shades. What shade do you want in there? All right, enough of that.
Hey, but last week we were talking about Phoenix getting dark themes, and we were talking about the idea of themes with all these different colors. And here we go. There's an example.
Yeah. All right. Next up, LiveView 1.1.5 was released and then quickly updated to 1.1.7. Some quick little bug fix follow-ups there in the same day. And what does it include? Well, it includes some bug fixes. You could expect that from a patch release, right? Some of those bug fixes are about running hooks inside of the portals. So portals are the new thing in the latest LiveViews. And so that's out there. If you were experiencing trouble before, try it again. But it also includes a new feature. Interesting. Cool. Let's check it out. What's the new feature? So it now includes a new stream async function, which is very similar to another library that's been out there for a couple months. We've got a link to that as well. So what is this doing? You can assign, things to the socket like immediately, right? And then there's also async assign or assign async. I always get the order messed up. And that is the same thing, but it just wraps it up in a task, right? And then assigns it when it's done. And then we know we can do a stream, right? And so a stream is basically this don't hold it all and state all at once kind of a thing, right? It's too big of a list. Don't hold it all right there. Mm-hmm. But we kind of need all of that, to be rendered at some point, and then, surgically delete or add or prepend, that kind of stuff, right? But that didn't work with async stuff necessarily. And so that's where this function comes into play. That stream async. And so the idea here is, that you can now asynchronously stream items into a configured Phoenix LiveView stream. We're using the word stream so often now. And so, this is just a good, consistent, consistency developer experience, upgrade here. It's like, I could do it async here, but then I can't use streams, right? But now you can. So now you can get the best of both worlds. You can have a bunch of async operations out there that don't necessarily hold all the results of that in the socket state forever. So if you're looking for more examples on that, you can go check out the changelog, and that's in Phoenix LiveView 1.1.5. Probably just want to get the latest patch, but if you're looking for the notes, that's where it is in the changelog.
And last up, there's a new Elixir Casts video showing how the new Phoenix 1.8 layouts work. So remember, the new layouts is in replacing the idea of the root and app templates with a function that you can customize and create your own function for an app layout function. And then you can create more of those functions. So then you can just say layouts.app, layouts.admin, layouts.special case, whatever it is, you can just customize those. So it's a new way of doing that. And the Elixir Cast videos are like 3 minutes long. And it just kind of gives you an intro to that and showing you where you get started with how to make those customizations. It's one of those features that I still haven't quite yet played with, and I'm looking forward to trying. But I did generate a new project using Phoenix 1.8 and grab the agents file out of it, the agents.md. Yeah. And there's a lot in there. It's like, okay,
it's critical. Yeah, there's a lot of things in there. It's like, don't do this. There's a specific example. Like a lot of languages do the index position of a list. That open brackets and then the index value. So like, if I got a list open index 8, that's like what, the 7th or 8th, spot in there.
0 based, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not happening in Elixir. You got to use enum at, and so that's what this agents file is instructing. It's like a lot of those little things. I remember using Phoenix.new, the fly IO thing, and it totally got screwed up on like rendering a curly bracket in Heeks templates. And there's an attribute that you can put into the Heeks that says don't interpret curly brackets in here. I had totally forgotten about that myself, but the agents.md file tells the agent that. So it's, you really kind of have to like reread it yourself too, like just for your own human context window. There's some good tips in there, but yeah, it makes it it makes the LLM actually like reasonable. Well, it wasn't terrible before, but now it won't get tripped up so often when generating some Elixir code. So it's pretty critical to having in your Elixir project now if you're using things like Claude Code.
Yep. And that's it for the news. This episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io, the only security platform with true Elixir support. I sat down with founder Michael Lubis to ask some questions about how Elixir developers should think about security. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you.
Here's this week's question. What security issues are you seeing these days with Phoenix apps?
It's a good question. I think cross-site scripting is sort of an underrated one. People aren't as familiar with it as you'd expect. So this is where a bad guy could, for example, execute malicious JavaScript in a banking or social media context. There was a very famous example with MySpace called the Sammy worm, which actually brought down the entire website. So you can search that on Wikipedia. But it's a very real threat. I find it very frequently during pen tests. People often don't realize that Phoenix has these built-in security protections for escaping user input with JavaScript, but they just love to bypass it. And I see that very frequently. So definitely cross-site scripting.
Thanks, Michael. Today, we're being joined by a very special guest. José Valim is here with us. Welcome to the show, José.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm really excited because I've been seeing you posting on social media about something called Tidewave Web. And I've actually been able to see it in action. And it is really kind of crazy and a little bit mind-blowing. And I was like, all right, I'm really looking forward to understanding more about what this is, because I'm also seeing that it's being pitched as for Phoenix apps, but also Rails. And that's kind of new too. So I'm really excited you can come and talk with us. And if you, dear listener, are not familiar with who José is, he is the creator of Elixir, and he is the founder of
Allegedly.
The alleged creator. I think there's too much video evidence to support it.
I knew I should have hit it better.
Well, yes. So thank you for coming. I'd love to just jump right in. So maybe you can just kind of help us understand, what is Tidewave Web?
All right. So Tidewave Web is a coding agent that runs in the browser alongside your web app. So like literally alongside, it's like it runs in the browser. So there's a chat window and your web app is running on the window on the side. And it is deeply integrated with your web framework. And as you said, right now, it supports Phoenix and Rails, but we want to add other frameworks in the future, and we can talk about it as well. I'll try to anticipate the next question, which is like, why Tidewave Web, right? Like we have agents in our editors. You can use something in your CLI. I'm going to start with the more practical point of view, which is if you have used like a coding agent to build your web app today, usually like imagine that you have a screen and you want to add like a CSV or like an Excel export, right? Usually in the screen, there's already a place where you know you want to add the button or a drop down, right? So if you're using a coding agent today, you can try like to YOLO it and say, hey, I wanted to add like a CSV export to the project screen. And then you hope the agent is going to be smart enough and figure out what is that screen that you're talking about, right? And where you want to add it. You can try to be lucky. Although usually the recommendation is be as precise as you can, right? Because it's more likely that you're going to get what you want, right? So if you want to be precise, the workflow is you open up the web app and they're like, oh, okay, this is where I want to add it. And then you go to your editor, you find the template for that page, you find where is the button, maybe you select, you point it to show to the editor, that's where you want to change. And then like, okay, add a button here that is going to do the CSV export. And then the agent is going to implement the feature, and it's going to say, hey, it's ready. And then you go to the editor and you refresh the screen and boom, runtime exception, right? Like there's an exception. You see the exception page from Phoenix or Rails, and then you see the stack trace. So you copy the stack trace and you tell the agent, you lied to me. It did not work, right? Sometimes it forgets to add database migration. And then you tell it, and then it fixes it, and then maybe it will finally work. Maybe you have to do a couple more loops. So my experience building web apps with coding agents, it has been great, but I feel that like I am still in the loop, but I am in the loop doing boring stuff, right? Like I don't mind being in the loop if it's like, oh, you have to make a decision. Well, how is best to design it? Oh, we have two potential designs. That's perfect, right? But I don't want to be in the loop like to copy exceptions, to translate what I see on the page to the editor. And that's exactly what Tidewave Web solves. Because we are running with the web app, you can like use our inspector and say, hey, I want you to add like a button here that is going to do the CSV export. Because it's integrated with the web framework, when you use the inspector and say, I want you to add something here, we can map the HTML on the client with the template on the server. So we are giving like usually really precise location, like, oh, by the way, this element is being rendered by this function component, by this template. With Phoenix LiveView 1.1, we give even like precise line location. We know the line where the thing is, so we can be like very specific. And yeah, so we send that information to the agent. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to write all those things. We can tell about the view, controller templates. And when it finishes the feature, it has control of the browser. So it can go refresh the page, mouse over, click a button. There is a demo that I shared on Twitter. When we were preparing for Tidewave launch, we wanted to make the videos in the homepage autoplay. So like we click the video, say, hey, we want this to autoplay. And then it implemented the feature. There's a whole video showing, like you can see Tidewave automating the browser and slowly scrolling through the page. And as it scrolled through the page, it would check like the DOM properties. Wait, is this video bigger than it was before? Like, did it actually scale? And I was like, yes, it scaled, right? So that's the idea, right? It runs in the browser, it deeply integrates with your web framework. And the consequence of that is that you don't have to be as involved doing boring stuff. You can focus on the more interesting parts of developing, of vibe coding, or whatever you're doing.
Okay, so you're talking about how this integrates with the browser and it's able to refresh. How exactly is this running? Is it like a Chrome extension where it's running outside of my application, that it has awareness of what's happening with the inspector? Because from what I saw, it looked like I'm adding a mix package and exposing something inside my router, like for as a web endpoint. So maybe you can help me piece that together.
Yeah, no, great question. So you install a hex package, or in Rails, you install a gem. you plug Tidewave in your router, and that adds a /Tidewave to your local development endpoint. So it's usually like localhost 4000 /Tidewave. And then we run our chat and an iframe containing your app
Okay.
all in the same page. And that's how we can, so it's being done over an iframe. And that's how we can control the page, because we can control the iframe. When building this, we explore like so many different ways of implementing this. Like, should it be like a separate desktop app, right? Like, should it be an MCP? And all of those would have like intrinsic limitations, like an extension. Extension, they are like sandboxed and limited on purpose. So the extension would not actually be capable of doing everything that Tidewave can do. So yeah, it's running literally in the page alongside your web app, like same host, same port, just /Tidewave.
And so some of the additional capabilities here, or the tooling, right, is that you say that it's in the web page, right? You can see your app to the right, and then you have the prompts there, or not the prompts, but the chat on the left, the messages. For example, I can say, add a, I don't know, notification bar here or something like that. I've seen it automatically try to do all the things, right? It's using a lot of the Elixir tools underneath, and we can get into that in a little bit. But then it's tying together the browser side tools too. I see a bunch of like page evals or something like that, where it's like, I don't know if it's taking screenshots, and how it interprets the screenshots. I don't know if it's taking the screenshot of the whole page or if it's scoped to like a specific area of the page. At this point, it becomes kind of a black box on when it decides to use these things. What kind of additional tools other than, Elixir code or Rails code introspection, like what additional tools does the web part put on top of that?
I think it's worth saying that we do have something called Tidewave MCP that we also use. So when we talk about tools, because the terminology here can be ambiguous, right? So there are tools which are things that we expose to the LLM, to the model, and the model chooses when to use them. So in this case, the tools that we have are the ones from the Tidewave MCP, which we call runtime intelligence. Those are things that connect to your web app to evaluate code, access documentation, run things in the database. So all those tools are there. And we add specific browser tools, as you said, page eval, right? So Tidewave is adding like, look, I want to evaluate and do things on the page. And also other things, like sometimes you have to restart your Phoenix app, right? So how can we safely restart the Phoenix app? Because Tidewave is running inside the app. So if we kill the app in the wrong way, Tidewave is dead, then the agent is dead and cannot restart itself. So we do add some tools to polish that, let's say, in-browser agentic coding experience. Not everything that we do with Tidewave can be done as an MCP, because we actually want to integrate with the page. I want you to be able to say, hey, I am selecting this element, right? And that information should surface to the chat, because the MCP requires the agent to call it. But now it's not that I want the agent to call something. I want like to push, like it's not like pull, right? I want to push something into the agent. Oh, there is an exception page. I want to see a button right there that says fix it, right? I don't want to. Those are the things that Tidewave Web adds, right? It's a collection of additional tools, but it's also like new UIs and new ways of like surfacing information to the model, to the coding agent.
So you mentioned this idea about you can have an exception, it could crash the app, and that could break the agent experience. So it makes me wonder, is there any sort of persistence to the conversation so it can be picked up, or is this all just like in-memory state? So
we use the browser. So since we're running the browser, we use IndexedDB. So everything's stored locally in the browser as well, which comes to another point. Like, we are not storing conversations in our server. You can opt in if you want, like for us to store some of the messages to improve the service. But by default, we only store like metadata, like which framework you're using, how many tokens that request use, and that's it. We don't know your messages, your prompts, and this kind of stuff. Everything is stored in the browser.
Okay. I use Cursor AI, the IDE, and David uses Claude Code. So at least we've got two bases covered. But with both of those, there's like Cursor rules where I can define information about my project. So it can know this is how I'm doing mocking in this project, or this is how I do fixtures or something like that. And then with Claude Code, you have the same types of things, right? So you define information that's persistent and can become part of that background prompt. Is Tidewave Web doing something similar?
Yep, we support agents MD. Because it's vendor neutral, right? So OpenAI, they were the first ones to use it. We also support it. And the cool thing is that because we are web framework specific, we know that you're using Phoenix or Rails. So even if you don't have an agents MD in there, we automatically inject one by default for you. We choose one for you, which is like kind of what all Phoenix apps likely want, right? So we try to also improve the default experience, right? So even if you get a Phoenix app today and then you're going to use it in Cursor or in Claude Code and you didn't do any tuning, any rules, there's a chance that you're going to have a better experience with Tidewave just because we inject that agents MD for you. And then we leave a link saying, hey, we are using one by default. Feel free to copy and paste it and start customizing it.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm starting to figure out a good workflow for this kind of stuff. The naive approach is to just have one big, agents file, right? But that's for every request. One of the chats I might be having is Elixir centric, and that default one would be great. But another chat could be like, I don't know how to make this Tailwind component here, and you just need to make a big fancy form here. That's not really about Elixir anymore, but I'm still loading up that context with all that default stuff, right? And so I've been trying to work out this. There's no one way to do it, right? Everyone's going to have their own way. There's lots of philosophies here, so who knows what's the right way. But one thing I've been playing with is I'm going to call it the core memory, right? That's the stuff in agents or Claude if you're on that one. The core memory is going to be fairly slim. And instead, what it's going to do is it's going to direct types of questions to either sub agents, and those sub agents are going to be instructed to like look up references or use certain tools, or I'll skip the sub agent because that's a Claude Code thing, and I'll just say, when writing Elixir code, look at this other memory file, and the memory file would be elixir.md, and it's basically what you guys have done with like in Tidewave. That's the default one. Or I'll say, if I'm writing ecto migrations, go look at the safe ecto migrations, markdown file over here, and give me a review and write with that kind of guidance. That way, it doesn't always load up the context with maybe irrelevant things. And it seems to be working out okay, working out pretty well. All that to say, so here's where we can talk about this is web apps are quite varied in like what things they're actually doing, right? And the stack can be quite diverse, right? And so we know that Phoenix is involved. We know that there's a web page involved here, right? That's what Tidewave Web is looking at. But it could be, the UI could be a representative of a monorepo of a bunch of different services working together. There could be a Go CLI. There could be another service over here that's written in Python, or gosh, we could be doing all of that within Elixir because the interop story there is all pretty great, right? Where do you think like Tidewave Web is going to help evolve or adapt to those kinds of things?
That's one of the reasons why we started with web frameworks first, like Phoenix, Rails. We are looking to Django, Flask, Next.js, because yes, it can be very varied, but usually there are a couple of things that are expected, right? Like, oh, it's going to have a database, you're going to have a UI, and right now, it's worth saying that we are really going for full stack. So like Rails full stack and Phoenix full stack. If you're using React, when you go through the inspector, we don't know that thing was actually generated by React. But React is, as of yesterday, we finished our internal milestone 0.2. And we started working on 0.3, and the big feature in 0.3 is React support, because I think that's going to unlock, right? So the direction that we are thinking about is, I think there are two things in here. There are two approaches. One is, look, you don't have to worry about it. Coding agents, they are only going to become smarter and smarter. So if you give it a project that is front end in React that calls Next.js that is going to call your Phoenix app because they are doing a front end for the backend, right? And then that is going to have a proxy, a Netflix proxy for GraphQL that can go to different sources. Some people say, you know what? The agents, they are going to be smart enough and they are going to be able to deal with all of that. If that's true, if that's the case, then it's a win for Tidewave anyway, because we are using those agents and it's going to be good, right? But the other thing is that one of the reasons for Tidewave to exist in the first place is that everybody is doing those horizontal agents that work with everything. It works for building CLIs, it works for mobile apps, it works for web apps, it works for every framework, while we believe that if we start like going for verticals, right? Like, oh, it understands my web framework. It understands the page. There's a lot to gain there. So the answer to this question is like, for us, what I feel we have to do right now, right? We just launched it. It was yesterday, is that we need to continue adding like vertical integrations, which of course means that we'll start like with the most popular ones like React, then maybe Vue, right? Because I feel that's where the gap is, right? Like, I think betting on the agents becoming smarter and smarter is going to be good, but there is a gap today, right? Like, everybody who used Tidewave MCP, which was the first thing that we announced before Tidewave Web, everybody said, look, this closes a massive gap, right? Like, we installed this thing and it immediately made our agents better. They are consulting the docs. They're being able to do things for longer because they can figure more problems on their own, right? So there's all this gap. And that's kind of where we are going, where our bet is. And then how that's going to translate to multiple agents, MD, to sub-agents and those kind of things, we don't know yet, but we'll see, right? So one of the things that I keep thinking about it in my head is like, I want Tidewave to be, especially when start adding like front-end integration with React, is I want it to be a full stack agent. If you're a LiveView developer, it is already a full stack agent, right? If you're using LiveView, great. Tidewave is full stack. It understands LiveView. It can already do JavaScript, right? But once it does React, I want it to be full stack, right? And I think there is already so much to gain there to say, look, this is an agent that is actually full stack because it has access to all the tools that you have. It has access to the browser. It has access to a REPL, right, within your environment. So that's why we are thinking like, and not only access, like I'm not giving it like a generic terminal, right? I'm not giving a generic browser. I'm giving a browser with a bunch of tools for your web framework, right? For your front end. That's the goal.
One of the things you said there is you talked about, okay, we've got Phoenix and Rails on launch. And now you're working on React and possibly Vue because these are big frameworks. They're, you know, it's a huge part of the market. So which leads me into my question of, okay, so this is a Dashbit initiative. It's not Elixir only. I'd like to understand a little bit more about the business side of, is this a subscription service? How's this being offered?
It is a subscription service. You can go and you can install it right now, access/Tidewave. Right now you have 20 user messages or messages that you send per month for you to try it out and evaluate and see if the tool is for you. There is a subscription for Tidewave itself. Then you have to bring either a Anthropic key or a GitHub Copilot, but we are doing more integration in the future. I like to say that today, like everybody's building appliances and saying, look, you can only use this appliance with our own electricity, right? And we are trying to, so it's like they are giving you Cloud Code, but it only works with Cloud Code, right? So, and then, oh, there is Cursor, but it's going to use their like LLMs, right? But so we want to try to break away from it and be like, look, we are going to support a bunch of different providers. You can bring whatever you want. You have your own agreement with them. We're not going to get in the middle. And then there is this tool, this small appliance that you can subscribe. It's currently $10 per month, and it's going to give you all those features that we are talking about, right? Hopefully the best, soon to be like the best full stack coding agent.
Awesome.
And then the support for multiple web frameworks. every framework or language that we need to support, there is a core that we need to write, and that's the Tidewave MCP, and that's open source.
Okay.
So part of what is Tidewave today, which is the MCP, it's open source. It will continue to be open source because that's the thing you have to run on your machine.
Mm-hmm.
There are many reasons why we chose for that to be open source. First one being, well, it's running on your machine. I wouldn't feel comfortable telling people, hey, there's this closed source thing you're going to install and run on your machine, right? So I was like, well, let's just make it open source and let's make it also something valuable, like an MCP people can use.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't want to use Tidewave Web, they can plug the Tidewave MCP into their editors. So there is this part that is different between web frameworks. But when it comes to Tidewave Web, there's also things that are like web framework specific, like understanding what is the template.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the agent, the UI, all those things, they are framework independent, right? If we wanted to make tools specific for web frameworks, it makes sense for us to target more than one, right? And try to validate the tool. But I also want to say that it doesn't have necessarily to be even web framework specific, right? So you can think like this idea of Tidewave applying to kind of everything really.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm building a mobile app. Why I cannot select something in the mobile app to tell the agent, hey, I want you to fix this thing. Why, if I'm building a mobile app, why I don't have a simulator automatically testing it as well. I think those ideas, they can be cross-domain, right? Like, I don't know anything about games, but I can think like, well, if you have a game engine and I'm doing a code agent, if the coding agent is running inside the game engine and has access to everything, it knows the things that were rendered, the things that were visible for a given moment, and has all this information accessible, right? If I can click things and say, hey, why this is wrong, it's going to be better, right? As well, because the point is that you don't want it to be like the human doing boring translation work, right? Like you don't want to be babysitting the agent, like, hey, this is wrong. Like, just let them run within the thing and change the things and access it. Not only the code, but at runtime, right? So it's still too early to say if you're going to branch off into doing mobile stuff. But yeah, like we do see ourselves like going outside of Phoenix and exploring all those different directions. Yeah.
So Tidewave is in the business of providing good tooling, right, for these code assistants, right? Now, developers also have a variety of tools that they're using. So I'm using Claude Code. Mark said he's using Cursor. Zed has its own, as well. All of these tools are basically the hub of like how developers are typically going to interact with their coding assistants. And there's more, right? There's Claude Desktop as well. You might just offshoot into something like Phoenix.new for purpose-built solutions. But generally speaking, I think developers will likely just stick with the tool that they're in all the time, probably their editor, maybe. Claude Code seems to be somewhat of an exception, but it does like hook into IDEs. It does have like an integration there. And then there's Tidewave Web. I'm wondering how this will converge with existing developer tooling. This may not be great news for Tidewave Web, so I want to hear your perspective on it. Claude Code has the ability to launch tasks in the background, just regular old tasks. It's not even coding for you. It's just like something that's in the background. And so one of those examples is start your dev server back there, right? It's not in the foreground anymore. Yep. It's just back there. And what that's incidentally doing is also providing maybe some tool. I don't know how Claude Code does it, but it's a stream of standard out at that point. That is probably the logs of the web server. And so when it's trying to debug things, I'm sure Claude probably has some prompt somewhere that says, go check the background tasks and see what's going on. That's one insight that I can get. Now, I know Tidewave Web can do it better, right? Because you're building the vertical for Phoenix and Rails. So you're going to do it better. There's that. A lot of other devs have integrated with like the Playwright MCP for having it to drive a web browser that's open. That is in their typical tooling at that point. And I don't know if they would prefer it. right? But it seems to be working. And so Tidewave Web is like, well, we'll bring the whole thing into the interface here where we can take screenshots, but theoretically Playwright MCP could do the same thing, right? Just via the Chrome debugger tools. No. All right. So tell me, like, where does Tidewave Web, will it converge with some of these other tools that, I mean, undoubtedly is going to have more market share, of developer time in it, right? Using the tools.
So the thing about Playwright, that's a very common question. Remind me to expand to the other points. But like basically every example that you gave, I'm like, we can do better in Tidewave. Not because it's me, but it's because it's vertical, right? So for example, what is the issue with Playwright? Like imagine that you're building, somebody asks for you to implement a feature. You have a project manager. And the feature that you have to implement is to transfer a project between two organizations, okay? So it usually goes like this. Well, in order for you to implement this feature, you need to have an account. You probably need to have two organizations. You may need to have admin roles in both of those two organizations, right? And when you are developing this feature, you forget AI exists, right? What are you usually doing? You open up the page, you create your account, right? Like you create the two projects, you make yourself admin, you do that setup so you can see the things, you can try it out, right? And then you start implementing the feature. Right? With Tidewave, that's very similar still. You would go, you open up the web, you start using it, you set up the account, and then you ask Tidewave, hey, I want you to add the migration thing here. You mention the constraints and it implements it. The issue with Playwright is that Playwright is not running in your browser. It's not running with your cookies. The first thing that Playwright needs to do is to create an account, create two organizations, create the projects to migrate. And a lot of times, it's enough for it to get stuck. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like, create, and then people are starting adding, like, so what you can work around is you can say, okay, for testing, there is this particular endpoint called login as user, login as manager, right? Like you start going through all this stuff and then Playwright, and then you add those things, and then Playwright is like, okay, I see that it works. But when Playwright was doing it, you were like, wait, there is a bug. In that page, I saw that something was weird. Mm-hmm. How are you going to tell the agent to fix that thing? Playwright just ran, the session is over, the session is gone. So now you have to you go to the browser, you start, let me go to the page, right? And if you don't have Tidewave, you're like, oh, on this page, on this particular thing of the process, it was kind of bad, you have to fix it, right? With Tidewave, you just go, it's like, oh, here is bad. You click it and say, fix it. For me, like, that's the thing. One of the things that I wonder is, there are a couple things. Like, so some people say, well, like coding is not going, I don't believe this, but some people say like code is not going to matter in 3 years. Right now, we're only going to be reviewing code, right? And then I'm like, well, if that's the case, why are we putting the agents in our editors, in the IDE to run alongside the code? Like, that's contradictory. I don't believe that's going to be the case. But to me, it sounds contradictory, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, the question is, where is the place to put the agent really? Is it in the code, or is it in the thing that you're actually building, right? Yeah. Because what we are doing is that we are building a web app, right? Like the code is just how we make it work.
Right. I see that as like you're saying, I can put the agent in my code editor or sitting outside my code editor, like Cloud Code, and it's operating on text code. Or I can put it inside my running application, which also has access to the code directly. I think that's the difference. It's like, it's in my running application. It can see exactly what's going on right now. It can take screenshots of it running right now and iterate on that very quickly.
That doesn't feel like it's a large leap, though, from where we currently are, right? So I use NeoVim. I also use Cloud Code. I kind of jump between both. I'll have a different tab for just Cloud Code. When I do that, it doesn't know what file I'm looking at. And so Cloud Code has a bunch of integrations with the IDEs. You could have it as a VS Code extension as well. And when you do that, the editor tells Cloud Code, what file am I currently looking at? There's already so much piping involved, plumbing involved for getting Chrome, for example, to have a debugger port, a dev port, right, of whatever you're currently running. Now, it's not Playwright, so you're right that those are absolutely different problems that probably can't solve. But that doesn't mean that these editors can't connect to. They already do with the DAP, debug adapter protocol, kind of stuff. So like Chrome can, I can totally imagine, I don't think it's here today, but I can totally imagine Claude Code one day, just having a flag saying, all right, tell me the URL for the Chrome debugger port. And then all of a sudden, they've got that one big thing that like Tidewave Web, has now, right? Where it can have the introspection of like, where am I currently, at in my current web app, and it's sharing all the same cookies and all.
We could eventually engineer a complete solution that works like Tidewave, right? Sure, it can be done, but it is already done here, right? And I can always like add like small examples to that is going to be like, your experience is not going to be the same. Yeah. So for example, well, you can use Chrome, the remote, that's what MCP does. It uses the Chrome remote debugging. That's what Playwright does, right? But what are you telling me that now you'll be always running Chrome with the remote debugging port on? Is like your Chrome that you use day to day, right? Because at the moment that you say, look, oh, I'm going to use a separate editor, right? And what if there is a bug on Safari or Firefox, right? How are you going so even if they say, look, we are going to automatically integrate with Chrome, right? What makes Tidewave useful is that it is your Chrome. It's not that it is Chrome, it's that it is your Chrome. It's the Chrome that you use on your development, on your day-to-day. Let me give you another example. Imagine that you want to use your coding agent, as you said, like Claude Code or whatever, to help you solve issues that are on GitHub or on Linear. What do you need to do? You have to install a command line thing, or you have to install a Linear MCP. But you know what is already logged into your Linear account? It's your browser. It already has access to it, right? So if I can use the browser, I don't have to do any of that. I can just go to Linear, right? Like, it's here. I open a different tab, get the information that I want, ask you to review it, boom, done, right? So there is this thing, I feel like there is this thing, like we created like this divide between like, our tools and where we are using a bunch of our day-to-day stuff. We are engineers. We can engineer a solution out of this, right? But it's not going to be perfect, right? I feel like running in the browser does have enough of an edge to be worth it, right? And then even if you say, oh, yes, sure, Claude Code can now access Chrome, but will Claude Code knows exactly how the HTML on the page translates to the template on the server? Because that's a tool that we implemented, right?
With source maps, maybe.
I see what you're saying, that if I'm using this specific editor and I'm using this specific instance of Chrome, which has remote debugging, it becomes very limiting. Like you say, I want to use a different editor now, or I want to actively use the same agent to debug something in Safari and have it be able to see it. It becomes very difficult, right? Because you get all these linkages between these things that aren't really built to cooperate together. They're supposed to be independent.
Right.
You're saying we can put it in the runtime thing, and it can be in any browser, and it can be in any editor.
Another way to think about it is that when it comes to AI tools for developers, because it's very early, we are at a time that it is like editors before LSPs. Right? So I can see like maybe in 3-4 years from now, we are going to have like a web framework server protocol that is going to do everything that Tidewave does, right? Maybe we are the ones who launch it, right? Like we come up with a standard that kind of unifies everything because we got tired of doing something for every framework, right? But the point is like, if you're just like, oh, I'm going to do like this generic tool, there is too much of a gap. By default, Claude Code cannot even access ATS table of your web app. It's as simple as that. If you're like, hey, what is an ATS table? Claude Code doesn't know how to do that. It's going to start a separate process, operating system process, that does not have access to your ATS table, right? It's as simple as that. Yeah. So every way you look at it, and then you're like, oh, but what about maybe Claude Code in the future, the feature that you mentioned, like, oh, it starts different servers, right? And I think it's a useful feature, right? Now imagine that you're running several Claude Code instances. Now you have to customize it to run on different ports so they don't conflict with each other. Yeah. And that's something that indeed you need to do. But again, it goes back to like, imagine you're in this scenario, like Claude Code, I prepared like 4 Phoenix web apps environments for you to do things in parallel. And now you have to test it, right? And now it's again, you go back to that place where, oh, now I need to open like the 4 tabs so I can see if it works. If I'm running the browser, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start 4 Phoenix web apps for you. I'm going to put them like into 4 iframes so you can see the pages being updated in real time as it builds the features. Because I'm running the browser and I know about the UI. So I think for me, like, that's very exciting because it's like we keep thinking about those things. And then I have to translate those problems. I have to translate those features. Like, well, I am running the browser now. So what does that mean? What can I do better? Right? Like that's my job right now. Like everybody announces a feature and then I'm like, okay, how can I make this feature better for Phoenix and Rails because I have the browser? And I think like in many of the cases, it can be quite a leap. And I know I cannot convince you fully, David, because you use NeoVim, right?
Because, well, I'll be
you use NeoVim, right?
Yes, I use NeoVim. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So I know I cannot convince you, but I don't think the terminal is going to be the place where, you know, the browser should be a better place for doing that than the terminal. And I cannot convince you because your NeoVim is going to say no. But I think for the huge majority of people,
very evangelical NeoVim user. It is the best editor out there for sure. No doubt about it. Okay, so you're pointing out a very stubborn thing about me and a very stubborn thing about most devs, I'm going to say. Yeah. They like their tools. Sure, they're going to search for other tools and they'll eventually switch, right? But when they like what they like they're going to stick with that. Like even if there's something a little bit better out there, like there's always going to be that one little thing that like this terminal multiplexer Ghosty is like better in all regards, but it doesn't have scroll back, so you can't scroll up, right? So like that one little feature is like the thing that is keeping probably like most iTerm 2 users from switching over, right? So it's just little things like that. When you're in like the development tooling kind of world like this, which we're all very used to, you get these folks that are, it's almost like talking politics with folks. Like it doesn't matter how much logic and reason and data that you provide them. It doesn't matter, man. Like they're going to stay with what they're happy with. But speaking of, there's also Dia and Perplexity. So like there's other businesses that are definitely like trying to get and build AI into, I actually use Dia. And so when like, it's pretty useful to have like these tabs are open. It's my Google Sheets tab. It's my linear tab. It can look at it. It can introspect and I can chat with that tab, right? I can have a YouTube video open and I can ask it to summarize it for me, which, you know, YouTube will do that on their own here soon enough if they're not already. That is a very, very helpful place to be because it's a treasure trove of like information for the AI for me to chat with. So I definitely agree that like the web portion of this is definitely going to be like an enabler for getting better systems out there. It's just that the tough spot is developers like their tools, man, and they're so stubborn.
Yeah. So there are two things. You're right that we are very peculiar about our tools. But the other thing is that it's really diverse. There are a lot of tools that we use, right? So we will probably notice that I'm kind of running these polls on Twitter, like those quizzes about what people do, right? So for example, like I recently asked about Git, where people use Git. And I was thinking like people would use, maybe it's the audience, right? Because I have a particular audience on Twitter. I think it was like 75% they use Git in the terminal. They're not using the one in the editor. So it's like, you have an editor that does that, but they still like, okay, I'm leaving the editor and going to my terminal to do this particular thing. The thing that I really wonder here, I think about where is going to be the handoff or the off-ramp of Tidewave. Oh, I'm working on a feature and I'm like, okay, now it's time for me to go to the editor, right? How can we make that off-ramp great? Like, will you want to review a little bit of the code in Tidewave and do small tweaks? Or is it like at the moment you want to review the code, you are going to the editor? Because that's something that already happens in Cloud Code, right? So you're using Cloud Code, it doesn't change. They're like, okay, now I want to review it. I assume that you are jumping into the editor at that moment, and how is that transition? And I think we're going to have the same. I actually did not know that Cloud Code can see where you are in the editor. When I'm running Cloud code inside the editor or even outside the editor, can it talk to, how does it work, do you know?
So if you're in a plain terminal and you just run Claude, it's not going to know anything, but it has a WebSocket. I don't know if it's documented or not. It might be reverse engineered, but there's a WebSocket API that I know that the NeoVim plugin, there's a NeoVim plugin that will, that looked for that and does the same thing that the VS Code, official VS Code, extension is doing. And it feeds in information to it. So there's some pretty interesting things that can happen there, but I don't think that's a public, API if I had to guess.
So if we expose this WebSocket as well, then we'll be able to, I'll look into it later. But that's one of the things that I think I'm thinking a lot about too, which is there are some people who feel like, oh, the IDE is dead, right? Like one of the things that we did not talk about today, we probably don't have time, is like what the future of coding is going to be. It's clear, like I listen to Think Elixir every week. It's clear from this conversation that you are using AI in your day-to-day, right? So you have already like kind of bought into this type of tooling, but we may not agree about the future and how that's going to be. And at this moment, for several reasons, I don't think the IDE is going to go away, right? So I also have to think, how can I make the transition as smooth as possible? Like, oh, I'm done with Tidewave. Now, do I jump into the editor without it feeling like a whole different context switch?
Lucky for us in Elixir, there are several MCPs. I just came across one by Thomas Millar for Livebooks. So he's got a script thing, and it's got a little tiny MCP server. I don't even know what it does, but there's a connection there. The Elixir LS in the latest version just came out with its own MCP server. Of course, there's Tidewave. So there's several entry points here. And so if you're using Tidewave, you've already got your web app here, your own, and then the Tidewave Web part. It can talk to the app and provide all that kind of information. And so if my editor is also connected to the Tidewave MCP, you kind of get into like what the MCP protocol is at this point, but you can almost inform, there's probably not a pathway for this, but it would technically be feasible. There's just not an official way to do it. To have Tidewave Web talk to my agent and tell it that I'm moving over into Tidewave Web. And I don't know what I would do with that, but they're all connected already. It's just that there's no plumbing for that kind of interoperability yet. That's still uncharted territory, I think.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying. Like, like maybe we are going to have something for web framework. Maybe we are going to have like more protocols for agents, or between we were talking about Cloud Code and the editor. Maybe we are going to see better ways to interoperate, and I think those are going to be very interesting, right? But kind of closing this up, I think the really interesting thing is that like while we are in this like wild west of like different tools, exploring different ideas, building tools that are specific to Phoenix, specific to Rails is going to give us leverage for the foreseeable future.
For sure.
Right? Maybe in 3 years, maybe in 4 years, it all becomes generic and it all integrates naturally. But while everybody's trying to do the thing that works for everyone with generic extension points, we can definitely nail a lot of experiences by saying, look, we are about Phoenix, we are about Rails, and your favorite web framework.
Tidewave MCP was a moment where there were several watershed moments for like using AI. So I know the developer community is even the Stack Overflow like survey, I think, revealed this, right? It's like so many devs have tried it and then opted not to use it. That's a large portion of it. So most people statistically, most developers statistically are not using AI. Let's assume that most folks are not using it all the time, right? And so folks are just like, I'm not on that bandwagon. Watershed moments for me to accept it was Claude Code, just the interface for it made sense to me, and the quality of it. So maybe that paired along with Sonnet for that model coming out. It was just finally good enough. And then for Elixir specifically, Tidewave because the context, it needed the context to be able to achieve anything. And so exposing it to basically all the documentation of packages and the runtime intelligence, that made it useful. More than just generic programming stuff, it actually made it useful for writing real Elixir code. Those two watershed moments for me was like, okay, well, the future is here now for me. I'm going to start learning how to use these things. I don't see where we're going to reverse, out of this. I think it's going to move forward in some way. Those two watershed moments, were critical. And I think the Tidewave Web, as you're explaining here, like introspection into the browser, that is going to be another like step to just making all of these AI agents like that much more useful and getting an ask, a feature to be somewhat shippable, So it's definitely worth it. So let me round out with this then. Tidewave is going to be something that I pay for sure. And folks that don't know about Tidewave yet, maybe you tell us, like, what is the business model of Tidewave? We'll ignore all the AI models. That's their own, pricing models. But for Tidewave, what do people need to do to use it?
Right. So if you're like, this sounds fantastic, I want to give Tidewave a try, you can go to tidewave.ai and find more information there. But in a nutshell, it's going to be add Tidewave as a package, like do the plug Tidewave thing. Restart your app and access /Tidewave. It's going to ask you to create an account. It's going to set things up. You need to bring an Anthropic key or connect to your GitHub Copilot subscription. And then you'll be able to try it. You'll be able to validate a little bit of what I am talking about. You can click around, ask it to do changes and see, well, if it's worth it and if it's not. And if it is worth it, there is a simple subscription model, a monthly model, $10. And the idea is that we have enough people enjoying Tidewave that we will be able to continue refining and improving the product, right? And as I said, like continue building vertical integrations, things that we can only build if we are worried about your web framework and not trying to chase the generic solution, right? And then hopefully that's going to make you more productive and is going to make you enjoy better your developer tools, enjoy more.
Awesome. Well, that is really exciting because I think this is the first time I've seen any tool quite like this. And maybe it exists in other communities and I'm just not aware, but this is the first time it's like, I have a tool that is running in my app that has awareness of my app in its current state and access to it. And it's a subscription service where some other aspect is, the AI agent instructions and things are happening, but it's still using, my own API key to Anthropic. It's still fully private. I'm not giving Dashbit all of my source code. You don't have access to any of that. So it's like the first time I've seen anything like this, right? Where it's like I've got something running in my app for development that is a service that helps me build the app. I've never seen it before. I've never heard anyone talk about this. That's cool. That's a new idea. And so I think congratulations for thinking outside the box.
Thank you. And the thing that we are excited about, because obviously we are using Elixir on the server. I can't wait to start more about the collaborative aspects of things, right? So, right? Exactly like as you're saying, like, I can have Cloud Code, right? Like doing 4 different things maybe.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
But what if now I can start like 4 different agents, each with their own Phoenix app running on a different port, and I can see it, right? We have a cheeky name right now, which is like, I don't know if that's the name we're going to use when we finally launch it. We haven't even started working on it, besides some proof of concepts, but it's Tidewave Studio, right? Because you're just seeing like all those different things happening, those different screens are like, screen 2, right?
Right.
Enhance, so, but that's like is going to be also very Elixir specific and powered by Elixir, a way of like kind of tying this all together.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in any of the cool stuff Jose has been sharing, go check it out at tidewave.ai. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.